Hey, greetings, guys. Welcome to the Wealth for Real Facebook page. It is Thursday, December 14th, 2023. Stunned that there's only 16 days, 17 days left in the year. But wanted to jump on a live here real quick with you guys and talk about something I kept forgetting to talk about the last few weeks, going back to like right before Thanksgiving. And that was the story about Cardi B going off on President Biden, vowing to never endorse anybody again, retracting her support for Biden, which of course was famously documented during the 2020 election. She had a big spat with Candace Owens about it. I mean, it was really almost like a centerpiece event at one point in the campaign, was when those two individuals went at it over whether Cardi B was qualified or not to even be endorsing anybody or discussing politics or whatnot. So if you guys recall that, she referenced that indirectly, semi-directly, I guess, right before Thanksgiving. I think it was the short week, like November 20, 21, somewhere around there. And basically what she was upset about was, in general, like the theme was a declining standard of living for maybe not so much her, since she's a multi-millionaire, but, her family, people she knew and grew up with in her home area within the Bronx, I believe. Just like really like kind of going off on that general inflation, standard of living issue or question. And then more specifically, she tied it to the issue in New York City of the New York City budget, including millions of dollars in proposed funding to house migrants, and taking that money from schools, libraries, the police force, things of that nature, right? And so this is a multifaceted topic, guys. I mean, like right off the bat, if you did a word cloud, you got inflation, you got Cardi B, you got you got the migrant crisis, you got standard of living. I mean, there's so many different ways to go with this. I think the main top level hot takeaway that I had from it, and like I said, I will return to it because there's just so many things to pick apart in it. I think it's actually more structured for like a formal YouTube video. There's some things I would probably want to show in the background and reference and call your attention to and stuff like that. So that's probably the way they'll eventually handle this topic. But the thing that I walked away with is this idea that younger generations, younger people, 30s and below, I would say, primarily, Gen Zers, but not just, I don't want to confine it only to them. They're really, in so many ways, and this also came up on a TikTok post I put up a couple days ago, when I did I tried to do a catchy headline on is Gen Z delulu. They want to, delusional. Do they want to? They say they want to retire at 54, but yet the standard of living is going down. So how are they going to do that? So I had this kind of like catchy thing I put up there, but it really was actually a supportive message towards Gen Z and just younger generation overall. And the reason being is that they have essentially completely and entirely grown up with this new information age, like growing up with platforms like TikTok in particular, but not just TikTok, free flow of information, the ability to go out and make up your own mind, not be completely, sort of tracked into believing either a CNN narrative or a Fox News narrative, but like, coming to their own conclusions and like seeing information that definitely would not have reached them in any other era at any other time than this one. And being like very open-minded about it and sort of seeing things for what they are. And I think, like hearing Cardi B basically say, I'm upset that New York City is doing this, like is having to allot funds in this manner. So there's not going to be funding for schools. There's not going to be funding for libraries. There's not going to be funding for the police. And that's going to affect her family and people she knows in the New York City region. And then concluding that, the support of Biden was misplaced and that it didn't make any difference whatsoever. And the notion that we can fund two wars simultaneously with Ukraine and Israel, and yet there's no money for schools in New York and there's no money for the police in New York. I mean, she caught on. Like, she's catching on to the fact that It doesn't matter who gets swapped out at the head of this hydra, okay? This multi-headed Medusa known as the government and the Federal Reserve System and the monetary system that we have. It does not matter who is sitting in that seat ultimately as President of the United States. This machine rolls on. It rolls forward in a way that you can't stop. It's built and designed to transfer wealth, to create economic imbalances, to benefit the few at the expense of the many. And that's just the way it is. And so, her support of Biden in 2020, there was lots of reasons for that. I don't think the only reason was inflation and the economy, because arguably some of those things weren't so bad under President Trump. I think there was lots of factors why people mobilized against Trump, and I think it was pretty self-evident. But I think that when Cardi comes on to like an IG Live, I forget how she delivered the message, and she's like, look, I'm done with this guy, and I'm not endorsing anybody else going forward because, essentially, and I'm paraphrasing for her, she realizes she was swindled. I mean, she realizes that this thing is going to happen, right? The wars are going to get funded, the money's going to get printed, the inflation's going to get created, no matter what. It doesn't matter. Now, of course there are times in our history where there's no war and there's no inflation. That's not because of the president. I mean, certainly it has no primary connection to the president. I mean, perhaps, a president makes a policy shift here or there, avoids some of these things happening or whatever. But ultimately, because of the timing on this stuff, because of the many faceted factors that go into these things, the president isn't solely responsible for these outcomes. So, in many ways, her criticism of Biden is misplaced because you cannot blame it all on him. But at the same time, on the flip side of that, you couldn't completely count on him, you meaning whoever, voted for him or supported him. You can't completely count on him either. So if you can't take all the blame, you're not going to get all the credit. And I think that's just something that when you look at things like inflationary forces in our economy, the inflation that we're experiencing didn't come from something that was done yesterday. It didn't come from something that was done 2 days ago, or 2 months ago. It's the constancy of the expansion of money supply that eventually converged with other factors, velocity of money, how quickly was it being spent, other macroeconomic factors in terms of supply and demand and so forth. But that root cause of money supply expansion, we've been doing that. It's been happening. And it just, it was the tinder that met the spark that resulted in 9.1% inflation in June of 2022 and stayed pretty high for a while after that. Now it's somewhat cooled to just, and I put that in quotes, just 3% or whatever the number is. Prices are still rising by 3%, guys, but it's rising at a slower rate than it was in the summer of 2022, about 18 months ago. So I think, there was so much significance, I think, to kind of wrap this up, guys, and there's going to be more to follow. But the significance of Cardi B saying what she said is indicative of the awakening that I believe the younger generations, particularly Gen Z, are experiencing. Okay, they are seeing this whole thing for what it is. Okay, and they are catching on and calling it out, and they're not being shy about calling it out. And I think Cardi B, who's not, I don't necessarily think she's Gen Z. I think she's a millennial. But again, that's not the most important point here. The point is she's still fairly young. I believe she's in her early 30s. And she gets it. Like, she gets the macro takeaway here, which is that my support for Biden and my belief that we were going to avoid these outcomes by voting for him, and we didn't avoid them, that big takeaway is just super, super exciting to see as it dawns on young people. Now, again, there are older people who are on these platforms and are changing their mind about things, but it's harder. I mean, when you've lived with a belief for 50 years, it's harder to change it than if you lived with it for 20 years, right? So it's just not happening maybe as frequently, and of course you don't find as many 50-year-olds on TikTok as 20-year-olds, But that's changing too, I think. I don't necessarily think that's going to stay that way forever. So that's why I kind of focus on the youth. But, you know, their willingness to be open-minded, to use these platforms, to listen to different messaging, to incorporate that messaging, even if it doesn't show up on a television screen, is the key factor here. And I think that was embodied in Cardi B's rant back in late November. So look out for that, guys. Again, like I said, there's some onions I want to peel back there and go a little bit deeper on some of the things that she talked about. But that was just a hot take that I'd meant to get out for like the last 3 weeks. Just hadn't had a chance to get it out. So hopefully you guys have some comments, questions about that. Would love to see the feedback on it. But yeah, super, super interesting and exciting to see those kinds of revelations being made in real time. So hope everybody has a great Thursday, and I will be back in touch with you guys soon. Thanks for supporting the channel and watching this, guys.